Good afternoon, and welcome to the Women Business Collaborative Faster Together LinkedIn Live series. We're thrilled to have you all here today to talk about what it's looking like for women in the boardroom. As you may know, the Women Business Collaborative is an unprecedented alliance of over 60 women's business organizations collaborating together to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all business women. It is the first business movement dedicated to equity and diversity, and it is comprised of professional men and women, business organizations, public and private companies, and the media, accelerating change through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability. By uniting more than 60 of the leading women business organizations and 432 champions, the WBC activates our vast network to attain immediate and long-term results around 9 essential action initiatives. The first 3 focus on executive women's leadership in business. They are CEO leadership and sponsorship of women CEOs, women in the C-suite and executive leadership with P&L responsibility, and women in the boardroom. The next 3 focus on underrepresentation of women in business. They are women entrepreneurs and access to capital, women in capital and finance, and women in technology. And the final 3 are critical to equity for women in business and underlie all the rest: diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender and pay parity, and women in the pipeline. Thus, our work focuses on ensuring that more women CEOs and in the C-suite and on boards, a demand for gender and pay parity, ensuring access to institutional capital and capital for women entrepreneurs, driving more women as controllers of capital allocation, parity for women in underrepresented business sectors such as technology, and leveraging learning and development to drive pipeline promotions. Interwoven across every initiative is our call for inclusivity, diversity, and equality for all women, including women of color, the LGBTQIA community, and other disenfranchised women. Our collaboration and network is spearheaded by our board, partners, advisory, and leadership councils. The WBC reaches millions of business leaders across the United States and the globe. The WBC is committed to diversity. Our councils and board of directors include more than 34% people of color. And the power of combining the collaborative approach with our women's business movement is already creating momentum and accelerating the pace of change for businesswomen. Today's topic is women in the boardroom, and we will speak with Ana Dutra, CEO of Mandela Global Advisors, WBC board member, and head of the WBC Women in the Boardroom Action Initiative. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Gwen.
We are thrilled to have you. And you and I work on this board report together, so I know it's going to be a great conversation, and I will learn from you today about what it's looking like. Why don't we start with our latest board report that shows that in October 2021, 139 women and 208 men were appointed to boards of public companies. This means women comprise 40% of the board seats. Can you talk a bit about this trend and what this looks like throughout the year? Is this trend going to continue, do you think?
So Gwen, as you know, because you've been my partner in crime in this, we started this initiative about a year ago. And when I talk about the initiative, it has 2 parts to it. First of all, it is the partnership with now 16 organizations that either have as their core mission or as one of their portions of their mission to create more diversity and put more women in the boardroom. And our partnership with Equilar and now with Bolster on the public and the private companies has also been incredibly critical for this report. Even more important than having 40% of women occupying new seats in October is the fact that we have seen a ton of consistency in this trend throughout the last 8 months. So it's been 41, 42, 40, but always hovering around the 40%. You can say, well, if we want parity, we want 50%, but hey, 40% is very, very, very good compared to what it was in the past. The other thing is that by uniting forces, all those organizations are working through several dimensions, right? We're working through regulators and legislators, proxy advisory firms, major investors like State Street Capital, Vanguard, BlackRock, as well as the corporations themselves and other organizations who promote women in the boardroom. So it is not a simple effort. It is a concerted effort. Nobody can take credit for it individually. And quite frankly, if we were all doing our things in silos, we probably would not have achieved what we have achieved today by communicating, partnering, and supporting each other.
Absolutely. And I love those words of like consistency, right? Throughout all this, I think we were at a peak of 46% in September, but also the collaboration piece of it. I think that it was just a couple of weeks ago, they said that in the S&P 500 companies, women are now 30% of all board directors. And we know that that's a critical tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
What does this look like for women of color? As you know, in our data, women self-identify, and we're seeing at about 38% of the women appointed that they're self-identifying as women in color. But you know a lot about this. What does it look like for women of color out there?
So if you were asking me this question 6 months ago, I would say the answer would be terrible, right? Because when we peeled the onion and started to look at African-American women, Asian, Latinas, LGBTQ, indigenous, the numbers were just awful. I think that because we saw really poor numbers a few months ago, the organizations that focus on each one of those segments of women of color, and I would say diverse women in any way, right? We're talking about LGBTQ, handicapped women, veterans. I think we started to pay more attention to that. So we're not nearly close to where we want to be, but we're seeing little by little by little the numbers getting better. I think that what corporations need to think about is the fact that when they get a woman of color or a woman who represents other diverse segments, it's a doofer, right? and there's so much talent out there, just so much talent, and we need to tap into that talent pool.
So this is interesting too, because the numbers are better for women on boards than they are for women CEOs, right? So women CEOs that are of color are less than 1%. How important is this? And what can this movement, at least at the board level, signal for the CEO or the C-suite or women in a company specifically?
So as important as the numbers for women on boards purely, right, in an isolated fashion, is the pipeline. Because if we don't get a strong pipeline, our pool 10 years from now is not going to be as strong as it is now. I have been looking at data over the last 15 years, and there's a very interesting phenomenon that I will challenge you and others to take a look at, which is if we looked at the US corporate landscape about 5-6 years ago, right, we would have seen a number of women who became CEOs. I'm talking about Indra Nooyi, Irene Rosenfeld, Eileen Gordon, Jeannie Rometty, Mary Houston, Mary Dillon, just to name a few. I will ask you to go back. And by the way, I'm talking about mostly women who actually retired over the last 3 years. And guess what? They were all replaced by men. All replaced by men. Denise Morrison at Campbell, replaced by a guy. Irene Rosenfeld, replaced by a man. Indra Nooyi, replaced by a man. So I'm actually starting to dig into the potential root causes for that. But we made a ton of progress, and then we walked a million steps backwards, because all these women, and even if we go back a little bit more, Meg Whitman, Ursula Burns, I mean, we can go through the list. They are all consistently replaced by male CEOs. So what is behind that? Is it like, is it a one and done? We put a woman there, so now the next one is going to be a guy? Is lack of awareness? Is taking your eye off the ball? I don't know, but it is factual that that's happening out there. So I would, one thing that I intend to do in the upcoming year is dig deeper into that.
And that leads to another thing. I think you and I are also trying to get the data we were talking about. how important is when these women take these board seats, whose seats they're taking, right? Whether boards are expanding, who they're replacing, exactly for that pipeline. And we're noticing that a lot of these women are first-time board appointments right now in what we're seeing. So how does that fit into this pipeline? And that's exciting, I think. And at the same time, it worries me that it might be a one and done, as you said, or it might be just a response rather than a true commitment that's sustainable.
So, oh boy, I have so many comments on that.
Be provocative, right?
I have so many comments on that. And you and I talked about that, right? I don't want to just look at how many women took board seats. I want to look also at the net, right? Even though 40% of the open board seats were filled by women, how many of those were already had a woman in place? How many of those women are replacing men? And in what cases women are leaving and being replaced by men? So that's number one. Number two is this, and you know, this is a passion of mine, is let's not just recycle the women who are in boards, but also make sure that we have a number of first-time board directors who are women as well. But we want to be successful, right? So I always say that getting the board seat is just the first step in the journey. We want to make sure that these women are extremely well prepared, that they know what they are getting into, they understand their fiduciary responsibilities to that board, because we want 5 years from now for boards to say, wow, we put 3 women on our board and they were amazing directors. They were top-notch and all that, because otherwise we're going to have the backlash, which will be, oh, yes, you know what? We went through all those movements, all those states put out those laws and all that, and we filled our board with women, and what did they do? So I always say that getting the interview is the very, very first step, right? But your job only really starts the moment you get that seat, and that's when you have to continuously shine throughout your journey as a board director.
I want to follow that thread for a second. I usually kind of end with this, but what advice would you give me? You know, I talk to many women, and you must as well. You know, they're saying, now I want to get on a board, or I've been wanting to get on a board. I need to get there, or I'm on a board and I need to sort of up the game. What advice do you want to give these women? And then I'm going to turn it back and we'll talk about the advice to the companies themselves. But
Of course. So first off, and I had this conversation just yesterday. If you're in between jobs and you're thinking that a board is a temporary solution, just don't do it. Because you know what? When you're in an interview and people know that you are at the same time playing, oh, I'm going to have the portfolio career, maybe be a board director in several boards, but what I really want is to be the CEO of the next company. You end up not getting either. I had this conversation yesterday with a woman who has been playing that double intention in her interviews. And I said, let me tell you what happens. I chair 3 nom-gov committees. And if I was interviewing you, and I started to suspect that, hey, you are interviewing both for several boards, but also for a CEO role, my first thought would be, well, if you get the CEO role, are you going to dump us? And what if you get a CEO role where they say, we don't want you to be in boards, or we want you to be in only one board? So pick your lane and put your energy and focus on that. And by the way, if you're between jobs and you're not sure, probably, maybe your best bet is to focus on that next CEO role. And then once you settle, you're established, you're successful in that, go for the board. The second one is, don't assume that because you had a very successful career as an executive, you're equally qualified to be a director. Go educate yourself. Go get certified in a number of things. I am a big stickler for continuous education, and I practice this myself every year. I get 1 or 2 certifications. I participate in a number of programs. And if I ask somebody, well, okay, you've never been a board director and you want to be on a board, what have you done over the last couple of years to prepare yourself for that? And the answer is none. I'm just interviewing. Being me is good enough. Next. I want to talk to the next candidate.
You're great, but no.
So, and then the third thing is, understand what your brand, your value proposition is, right? Don't throw spaghetti on the wall. Oh, I can do that. That's another thing that hurts credibility. Is you mention one area and the person says, oh, I'm super experienced in that. Oh, I know that as well. Or no, pick your 2 or 3 assets, value proposition, and walk into conversation saying, those are the 2 or 3 areas where I have deep experience, where I believe I can add value to this board or to any board, and go with it and be calm and be confident. Because yes, the fact that you were even a CFO for 6 months does not mean that you have deep CFO experience. So pick and then comfortably say, I got a call just yesterday when I said, you know what, it may not be abundantly clear, but I think I would have a conflict of interest with this particular role. But wait a second, send me the spec. I'll send you 3-5 names of women who could be great candidates for this, right? This is a two-way street. It's not just getting the job. It's getting the job that's right for you, that's right for the company, that's right for shareholders, which is the role of directors at the end of the day.
And it sounds like, what advice would you give companies that say, you know, we're wanting to do this, we want to be deliberate, we really want to be intentional in diversifying our boardroom? What are a couple of things you want to say to them?
Yeah, my first advice is don't just check the box. It becomes abundantly clear when companies are doing just that. Be intentional about diversifying your board. I don't take the comment, oh, we looked and looked and looked and we can't find anybody qualified. Well, let me give you the names of 8 organizations who will provide you with a list of great candidates for this position. And then the third is around inclusion, actually, because put yourself in the shoes. Let's pick a situation: a first-time woman director in a board where she is the first female director, and it's not easy. It's not easy. So for lead directors, board chairs, CEOs, be acutely aware that it is your job now to help to make that person successful as well. So that's the advice I would give. And then if you're saying you don't have qualified candidates, talk to us, talk to WBC, talk to any of our partner organizations. You will have a list that's bigger than you ever thought you would have in your hands.
Well, that leads me to my final question is, what does the WBC have planned in this space for next year? We've been doing this monthly board report.
Oh, wow, I should be asking you that question.
Do you want to give a teaser into kind of maybe really building out research on this, right?
And by the way, you, Gwen, you have been critical, fundamental in this planning. So we started putting our toe in the water and issuing this monthly report, which is no easy task. And Gwen has been a phenomenal leader in it. And now we're talking about, what about the annual report, right? What about a report that is not just the compilation of those monthly reports, but that also adds flavor to some hot topics in diversity in the boardroom, and gives more exposure to some of the organizations that we're partnering with. So stay tuned. But our next step is to, at the end of every year, to publish an annual report that focuses on women in the boardroom, higher diversity, equity, and inclusion as well.
It's going to be fun. I can't wait to put this together and think through with you the bits and pieces and where the real kind of deep insights are, so that we can ensure this movement and these trends continue to happen and we continue to have diverse leadership. Thank you, Ana. It has been, as usual, a pleasure.
And happy Thanksgiving to everybody who is watching this podcast.
That is when it's a week away. That's all that we have time for today. Thank everyone who joined us. Our next show will be post-Thanksgiving, December 2nd. Keep up to date on our next guest and the progress of the movement by following us on social media at WBC Collaborative on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thank you, Ana. Thank you, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving.